broken down into steps that are way easier to follow than you might imagine, so that you can have a go, create this, and amaze yourself. Okay, so as explained in the intro, I'm going to break this down into steps so that not only you learn about the painting process and techniques, but also about the app that I'm using, Procreate. But that isn't to say you couldn't use a different app on a different tablet and still follow along. Having said that, within the app Procreate, I'm using the default A4 canvas, which might be different in different regions, so take note of the physical dimensions, which is 297 by 210 millimeters at 300 dpi. I'm also using within Procreate one of their default color profiles, which is the sRGB code, the one that ends in 2.1. I'm also using Procreate's default brushes, so I'm going to be using within airbrushing the soft brush, the medium brush, and the medium hard brush. Within inking, I'm going to use the studio pen and the dry ink brush. Within artistic, the leatherwood brush. Within charcoals, the burnt tree brush. Within luminance, the light pen. And within organic, the rainforest brush. In terms of the colors, I've already pre-selected a color palette that I'm going to use. Each of these colors, if you go to the value section, has what we call a hexadecimal code associated with it. Each of these codes is listed down in the video description. You just need to take note of them or copy and paste them one at a time into this box and press enter. The color will appear up here, and then you can tap it into a blank color palette for yourself. Or alternatively, to save you some time, is a link next to the codes that takes you to my Patreon page where you can download the color file for free. And Patreon is also the place that you can support this channel and gain access to exclusive content, such as extended versions of most of these tutorials. I'd like to say a massive thank you to those people who do support me over at Patreon. It makes a huge difference, so thank you so much. And if Patreon isn't your style, and you still want to support the channel, well, you can subscribe, obviously, give the video a thumbs up, and leave me a comment. And with all of that said and done, we're going to get started. So the first thing we're going to do, on layer 1, is we're going to go to the airbrushing medium brush. We're going to use the first color on the top row. I'm going to put the size at 20%. And 100% opacity, and then I'm just going to create an area here first of all, just leaving a gap at the top, but otherwise just fill in the rest. And then going to switch to the organic rainforest brush. I'm going to reset it first, then tap on it, go to the stroke path and put the spacing at 50%, and it just separates some of the particles of that brush texture. Going to put the brush size maybe about 3% and 100% opacity, and then we're just going to chip away at this edge. Add some of this texture in here so we don't see the edge so easily of that shape that we created. Just blend it in around that edge. Bring some in over the top. Shut down some of that white. We want to get rid of the majority of it. Only a couple of bits should remain, really. Something like this, so we don't see that edge of that circle anymore at all. I'm going to go to the layer, put on the alpha lock. I'm going to go back to the airbrushing, and this time I'm going to use the soft brush. I'm going to use it at around 10% size and around 30% opacity, and I'm going to use the third color on the top row. And I'm just going to circle in from the center and then just expand that a little bit outward like this. So we're creating a sense that we've got light emanating from that area, and it's just dispersing outwards a little bit, and it doesn't need to be neat because we're going to blur this in anyway. We'll do it now. We'll go to the adjustments, we'll go to the Gaussian blur. We'll just blur it in, maybe to about 30%. Deselect. I'm going to keep the alpha lock on, but I'm going to go back to the organic rainforest brush. I'm going to go in with the second color on the top row, and I'm going to put the brush size 2% and 100% opacity. And then I'm going to start working in some more textures now. So we've got quite a lot of light coming in, not just from this area, but from sort of above the sky generally. So we're going to have its impact kind of dispersed in and around the foliage that's in this back area really. I might even put the brush size up a little bit, maybe 3%. Get a bit more separation of some of those textures. And just randomly tap and spread it all around these different background areas. I want to keep it kind of as random as we possibly can. We don't want it to look uniform. We don't want to lose the background dark colour either. We want to make sure that we are kind of dispersing it really quite evenly across the whole canvas. Now it is going to be a background element and it is going to be obscured by other things, but it's important to set the stage and create a really nice kind of set of textures back here nevertheless. And then I'm going to switch to the third colour on the top row. Same brush, same settings, and now I'm going to start introducing some of this light colour, and it will start to cross over in the very middle areas as well that we've already done. Increase and multiply that effect, and again we can extend it off to the edges, probably preferencing the upper area a little bit more, naturally enough. We have most of the light coming from above. More specifically, we're going to have light pouring through here, but in general the light is coming from above, so we're going to have more of it up in the upper areas, and that makes sense. So let's just evenly distribute that around, again keeping it quite random, but yes, definitely preferencing the upper areas a little bit more. Not to say we can't have some that creep down a little bit lower as well, but just not as much. And once we've spent a few minutes just doing that, get it to this kind of effect, but it looks quite nice already. We're ready to move on. I'm going to create a new layer, layer 2. I'm going to tap on the little N, scroll down to the add. So that changes the blend mode to add. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to go in with the 10th colour on the bottom row. I'm going to put the size to 30%, but I'm going to put it down to only 10% opacity. I'm going to tap in a few times in the center area. Just going to really bring out that luminance. Maybe just tap in and around that area generally. Maybe just a little bit up at the top to the left and right, but not much. Once I've created that overall glow, I'm going to stay with the soft brush. Maybe turn it to about 3% size and about 5% opacity. I'm just going to bring down from the top, hold it, and then similarly I want these lines to be kind of fanned out. Almost straightening up when it comes to the left side, but you can see you created this kind of series of lines. We don't want them to be too visible at the end, but we're going to get them in there initially. And then we can go to the Gaussian blur within adjustments, blur it in, maybe to about 15%, deselect, turn the size of that brush down 2%, and even further down on the opacity, maybe 3%. Again, we can use them as a guide, and we can do straight lines, hold it until it snaps, and then we can go between, hold it until it snaps, find an appropriate placement for it. Once it snaps, you can keep moving it, find it so it runs seemingly kind of parallel with those lines. As long as you're dragging it from roughly the same kind of point up here, then you can find an appropriate place for it. Once you've done a few of those, again, adjustments, Gaussian blur, slide it across, maybe about 8%, deselect. You can always come back to that and emphasize it a little bit more later on, but as long as we've got a sense of it there to begin with. I'm going to go to my layers, and then I'm going to create layer 3. Back to my colours. I'm going to use the 5th colour on the top row. I'm going to go in with the organic rainforest brush, 3% size, 100% opacity, and then I'm just going to start bringing in some darker colours over at this side. I'm just circling it in from this side initially. And this is obviously projected further forward towards us, So we're going to get this darker tone, slightly richer green, certainly darker. Circle it in. As it gets towards the outer edges, we just want smaller amounts of textures, little sections that stick out maybe. We don't need to go beyond about halfway. And then on this side I'm going to have a tree. I mean, it's all trees, but we're going to have a noticeable tree trunk. And then some of this foliage just sticking out. Cutting in front of some of what we've already created, perhaps. We don't want to completely obscure everything that's in the background. We want some of it to show through. That's why we created it. So once we've got a section here and a section there, we're going to move along to the 6th colour. And we've got an even darker tone coming in here as well. Overlay it. Build it up. More so on this side actually, I think. Makes more sense. And then we've also got the next colour, 7th colour, which is a kind of richer green, layering up these textures. Mix them all in together. So we're getting really healthy types of different green in there. It looks quite nice. We'll go for maybe the 8th colour. And we're getting some variety in there. And the 9th colour. Just smaller amounts of these perhaps. Some of this as we're coming down. It's about the 3rd line, or a line, imagine like a horizon line about a 1/3 of the way up from the bottom. We'll just bring some of these greens across. Not too much because they're not going to be noticed that much, but just hints of them. And then going to create a new layer and tap on the new layer and put on the clipping mask, which creates a little arrow and links it to this layer. But it is on a new layer, and I'm going to go to the N and scroll down to the add blend mode. I'm going with the rainforest brush again, and we're going to use the 10th colour on the top row. 3% size, 100% opacity, and we want some of this really bright light to be impacting here. Just clipping some of this foliage at the edges. Really making it vibrant. Can have it tracing back here a little bit, but predominantly around these edges. Once we've got a sense of that, we can even go to the layer slide and duplicate it, which does ramp it up quite a lot. So we could go to the A, tap on it, and dial it back, dial it up, down as much as we want. So that's on none or 0. I'm going to dial it up maybe to about 30%. In fact, maybe a little bit more, maybe about 40%. And even on that new layer, I can go to something like the 6th colour on the bottom row. And then I can continue to push it a little bit with this colour as well. And even extend it further left and right. And that's really starting to help bring through this sense of luminance, this light, in a really useful way. Okay, we're going to go to our layers and create a new layer, layer 6. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to still use the rainforest brush. I'm going to go to the 1st colour on the middle row, 3% size, 100% opacity, and then I'm going to have the ground coming in here, about halfway. Same on this side, about halfway coming in. And this is the point where we're going to have the tree trunk, and we're also going to introduce the bridge. So for the bridge, I'm going to go for the 4th colour. I'm going to go to the airbrushing medium brush. I'm going to put it down to 4% size and 100% opacity. And I'm just going to bring it in, and I don't feel like I need to do it very neatly as an arc. Do it by hand, just go over it a few times. If it looks a little bit lumpy, a little bit unneat in a sense, then that's okay. We're doing quite an ancient kind of stone bridge, so it doesn't need to look super neat and precise. Perhaps the arc underneath needs to be a little bit neater than the top. The top we can even have lumps and little stones that stick up, so maybe turn that down a little bit more, 2%. And we can have individual stones that just make it uneven at that top surface. That's quite a nice effect. Make it irregular. Nice kind of lumpy stone appearance at the very top edge. So once we've got this, we've only got the rough centre of that top shape in. So I'm just going to put the size down, maybe 3%, 100% opacity, and well, I'm going to just judge where the beginning of the arch of my bridge is going to be. I want to narrow it down a little bit. So I guess you need to judge the distance between there and there to be roughly equal. It is a little bit judging by eye. And then I'm going to take a nice big kind of curve all the way across, hold it until it snaps. And then obviously you can continue to move it around. It might just take a little bit of judging by eye and playing around with that shape until you're happy. And then you can just fill it in. Try that again. And just fill it in. And again with this underside, well, we don't want that to be absolutely perfect either. You can just create some irregularity. Some little bits of stone that stick out. It is made out of lumps of stone and it's old, so we'd expect a little bit of irregularity to that edge. I'm actually going to take a line across so it skims, hold it, and if you struggle to get it horizontal, then take it somewhere where you know it definitely isn't, and then with the other hand put your finger down and then it will judge it for you, and maybe you can just join the bottom of that bridge up to that line as well. Now I'm going to have a little step where the water passing under the bridge just falls down at a slight waterfall effect, so I'm going to put that up to maybe 5% size, and then just along that line, do that again, hold it, and we've created a little bit of a thick band for water to pour over a little step. I can just fill in down here, just initially, close down that area like that. So I'm going to create a new layer, layer 7, and I'm going to go to the 5th colour on the middle row. I'm going to stay with the medium brush with an airbrushing. I'm going to put it to maybe 3% size, 100% opacity, and zoom in. And then I'm going to use this slightly lighter colour to create a series of stones that just follow along this arch, and they can be varying thicknesses, but you'll notice they don't quite go all the way to the edge. But we definitely want a series of stones. Again, some of them can be quite thin, some of them can be chunkier, some of them can be squashed in. But you want to run this along. Again, not all the way to the edge. There's a gap between these stones and then the edge here. Maybe a bit more of a squaring off of some of these as well. Down to this point. I'm going to turn it down from 3 to 2%. And then at the top, I'm going to employ a similar technique. Just create a series of stones that run along that top edge. A little bit of separation of them. We can use the bumps that we've already half created as a guide for where we're going to put these individual stones. It's not overly difficult or complicated, it just takes a little bit of putting them in there. Maybe a slight squaring off where they meet each other. So once you've got some of those in place, then I'm actually going to do some stones that do cut in that direction. So if I zoom in here, a stone that runs a little bit more horizontal and just fills in some of those gaps. You can zoom out, you can see the contrast. Now I'm no bridge builder, and It could be that what I've just created here wouldn't work. Physics of it perhaps just don't make sense, but it doesn't really matter. We're just creating something that looks nice, has the effect. So create some bigger dashes, some smaller dashes. Just running a little bit differently than everything else we've added. Slight squaring off in places. Rotate it if it's easier, like I have done. And it's only subtly different, this grey, compared to the first one. So you'll notice it, but it's not too dramatic, which is the look I'm going for. And then some longer pieces over here as well. Then again, you can see that change of direction. I think that's important. As we come down here, maybe you could have some bigger blocks that really are important in that kind of foundation of the structure. But you can have little ones that fill in, like a dry stone wall effect, which is certainly something I'm very used to in the countryside in the UK. I'm not sure necessarily they travel to different parts of the world, but there is this effect of adding stones together of all sorts of different sizes, fill in the little gaps. Next, with that layer, I'm going to tap on it and put on the alpha lock. I'm going to go to the charcoal, burnt tree brush. I'm going to go back to my colours, and I'm going to try out these different colours now. So I've got the two greys that I've already used, and then we've got some lighter colours. So I'm going to go for the 6 colour to begin with. Size maybe at 10%, and the opacity not too high, maybe about 40%. And then I can just start to add some of this texture, and you can see it really brings out a nice effect. It's not going to add it to the dark grey colour, it's only adding it to the lighter, slightly lighter grey. And we can just smatter in a variety of different kind of texture. It's all the burnt tree charcoal, but you get the idea. Brings in some nice stone kind of looking texture. So press lightly. Now some of these gaps are a little bit big between these stones. We can go in and we can adjust and amend that. I'm not going to worry too much about that at this stage. I'm just going to get some of this texture in here to begin with. Start to create that kind of rough effect to begin with. Maybe go to the next colour, 7th colour, turn it down a little bit, 2%. We can start to use that now on just maybe the top edges, some of these stones, create some highlights. Obviously, this edge is going to point more upwards, so we can highlight it there as well. You can spend as long on this. This is the kind of detail you could spend a long time on, and if you've got the time, I encourage you to do so. My tutorials are really designed to be efficient and get us to an effective place relatively quickly, but I do encourage people to spend longer and refine it even further if you're enjoying it and you want to do so. Might put the texture back up, 3%. Again, getting some of that variety. Might be the odd stone is just lighter than another one. Not too light though. And let's look at our other colours. So we've got maybe the 10th colour on the middle row. Get some more brown coming in here as well. You can just layer up the different colours. Disperse it throughout. We'll go to that layer, turn off the alpha lock, and go in with maybe the medium brush with an airbrushing. Go in with the 7th colour, 1% size, maybe 30% strength, opacity. And we can use this now just to, maybe just along the top edge, create a bit of a highlight. Or even a series of highlights along stones. We could even go and just sort of close up some of these gaps a little bit, make the gap between them a little bit smaller, be a bit more precise with our shapes, make them interlock a bit more tightly. We've got the rough textures in there. We can refine as much as we like. Don't be restricted by what I'm showing you. spend longer on it if you prefer to do so. Make your bridge look more solid and fit for purpose, just after the overall effect. Okay, we'll come back to the bridge. We're going to create a new layer. I'm going to go in with the medium brush with an airbrushing, and I'm going to go for the fourth colour on the middle row. 3% size, 100% opacity. And then just from here, I'm going to have a tree trunk that cuts up at the side of the bridge. So a bit broader at the base of the tree trunk, naturally enough. And then turn it down 2%, have some branches that just come off from the tree there. And it can go in and out of the foliage that we've already created. So you see bits that just come up and then disappear through the foliage, and that just gives you a bit of depth. Maybe another one off the edge of the canvas, maybe turn it up 4%. You just see some of the tree trunk, but not all of it. Maybe we can go backwards, maybe second colour on the middle row, turn it down 2% size, 30% strength or so, and then just this edge is going to catch the light, so you can go over that a little bit, add some textures, and then an even lighter colour, maybe the third colour. Turn it down even more, 1%. Add some textures along the edge of that tree. Same over at this side, just a little bit, a hint of lighter colour on the edge of that tree trunk. And we'll just stay on the same layer. We'll go for some more foliage to cut in front. So maybe go back to the top layer, we'll go for the seventh colour. We'll go in with the organic rainforest brush, same settings, but this time at 2% size, 100% opacity. And then just some foliage that maybe cuts in front, obscures bits of that tree trunk. A little bit in front of this one too. Not too much. But then we're going to come down into this area and we're going to build in some green down here. I want it to start to cut down in front of the base of that bridge down to the water's edge. So bring in some of this texture. Could be uneven. Let's think about richer greens even. So let's go for these greens down here. So maybe the fourth colour on the bottom row. Not massively different, just a little bit richer. Bring in some of these. Just move along to more vibrant one. The third green, even richer. Got the second green, which is more vibrant. So just use that more sparingly. Just a few touches of that. Maybe the light is just catching it there at the top. Blending it in. Let's go back to the fourth on the bottom row. Again, just bring in some of this green. It's starting to blend in the edges of our bridge. It's kind of buried there a little bit in the earth. Again, just lighter colours. Perhaps we'll go for the fifth colour. A bit lighter. Tap in a little bit. Bring that green over on this side as well. It's quite a nice green. Bring it up near the top. And that's starting to blend it into the environment quite nicely. So I'm going to create a new layer. Tap on the end, scroll down to the Add Blend mode. I'm going to go in with the Rainforest brush within Organic. I'm going to use the 10th colour on the top row. 1% size, maybe 80% strength, a little higher on that 1%. So it creates some gaps and separation, and we're just going to have some organic little plants and moss and other things that are just forming at the top of our bridge. And they are going to catch the light and really illuminate that top edge in quite a pleasing way. Just skim that across the top. And then it sort of disappears at the edge. Have some little bits that stick up as well, more substantial. Really just illuminate that top edge. Again, it just brings that sun further into the scene in quite a nice and effective way. Then we can have it appearing underneath as well, so let's turn it down a little bit more. Just at the underside, maybe a couple of things just hang down. At the back part of the bridge, we're just seeing it a little bit, but maybe not as much. Just a hint of it. A couple of things dangling down. Just a little sense of it there. I might go back to layer 4, tap on the top version, merge down, so both layer 4s are on one layer. I might create a layer above that, layer 9, and I'm also going to change the blend mode to add. Stay with the rainforest brush, same settings, except 2% size, and then just back here behind the bridge, we're going to have some areas here that are illuminated, maybe predominantly on this side. Again, it can just skim that edge. Let's go for an even warmer colour. Let's maybe go for the 9th colour on the bottom row. Inject some of that warmth and sunlight back here as well. Again, just skim it along the top edge. You can be a little bit looser now because we're a layer underneath. Maybe we could bring that upwards into the upper areas as well. And that's starting to bring that effect of sunlight through quite nicely. Perhaps we'll go for a green, maybe the 4th colour on the bottom row. Bring some slightly cooler greens back there in the distance. It's still affected by the lights, but not in quite the same way. Not in the direct sunlight, but get some nice colour greens coming in there in the background. That works. Back to the top layer, create a new layer, layer 10. Organic, rainforest brush. Back to my colours. I'm going to use some vibrant colours. So we're going to go for the 2nd colour on the bottom row. 2% size, 100% opacity. I'm going to bring in some vibrant greens. The sun's going to start catching it. It's catching all these other areas. So it's going to catch here as well a little bit. Just a couple down here. Maybe lessen the sunlight. Go for the 6th colour on the bottom row. And then we can just bring an area here where the sun is catching a little bit more significantly. I think that works quite nicely. With that, we can also go to the smudge. Put the smudge on the dry ink brush within inking. Maybe 4% size, 100% opacity. And we can just have some kind of grass effects just pushed through. Doesn't need to be overly dramatic, just a few hints at it. Especially seeing as it's super illuminated in this area, we can just hint at it. Maybe push it a little bit here and there as well, but not too much. Okay, I'm going to take that whole image. In fact, I'll go to the top layer first of all. We're already on it. Wrench, add, copy canvas, and paste. I'm then going to go to the selection tool. I'm going to go to the rectangle. Just grab that whole bottom section here. And you can see it's lined out in the area we haven't selected. We've only selected the bottom area. Go to the layer. With the duplicate image you can see in the thumbnail, tap on it, clear. It's got rid of that bottom section, which allows us then to go to the transform, flip it vertically, and then we can drag it down. Now I'm going to squash it, put it on freeform, squash it, condense it, find an appropriate place for it down here. Now I don't want it to be a mirror reflection, so I'm very much going to distort it. Adjustments, motion blur, to the side, maybe about 45% and deselect. Now it's too vibrant, but I wanted a hint of it in there to begin with. I'm going to create a layer above that, layer 12. I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush, and I'm going to go to the 8th colour on the bottom row. 10% size, 20% strength. I'm just going to shut down. I don't want all that light, not in that form anyway. So I'm just going to soften that in. I'm then going to change to the artistic leatherwood brush, and I put the leatherwood brush setting, stroke path, spacing to 30% on the slider, and done. 4% size, 90% strength, and just bring some texture through here. Press lightly as you go higher up and then harder as you come further down. It changes the size. Then we'll go to the 1st colour on the bottom row. Same settings, 4% size, 90% strength. And bring in some dark colours from this edge. Run it across. Press on more as you get closer. So you create this variation, which is quite nice. Go to the adjustments, the motion blur, and blur it to the side. Sideways as much as you can without going up or down. Maybe to about 50%. Deselect. And it might be a bit strong that, so we can go to the layer, tap on the N, just dial the opacity of that back down. Maybe to about 80%. Click out of it. And that's just created some more disruption and disturbance in the water that we can work with. Now I'm going to create a new layer above. Tap on the N, scroll down to the Add, Blend Mode. Okay, and on this layer I'm going to go in with the airbrushing soft brush. I'm going to go to the 9th colour on the bottom row. 3% size, 20% strength. Just underneath this edge, this line, I'm going to start introducing a kind of glow. Skim over it a few times, really build up that glow. Bring it down, extend it further towards us, mainly in the center, creating a little bit of a channel. Skim it across a few times like this. And then going to go to the artistic leatherwood brush again, stroke path and spacing 30%. Click done. Stay with the same color. I'm going to press lightly across here. Skim it. As it comes closer to us, press on a bit more. I'm going to go to the adjustments, motion blur. Blur it to the side to about 30%. Deselect. Back in with the airbrushing soft brush. Still with the 9th colour on the bottom row. 3% size, 20% strength. And as we come down here, we're going to have some points. Maybe even turn up a little bit more. High on the 3%. Just a few points in the water here. Press lightly. Turn it back down again. 2%. And then as we come further up, low on that 2%, those points are going to become more like dashes, highlighting the top edges of ripples. And it's going to merge with the effect that we've got already there. So let's turn it down even more. Really low on that 2%. Again, just slightly random dashes that disperse amongst what we've already got. Can extend a little bit at the edges, but not too far. I want to keep it relatively in this section. And then I'm going to switch to the Luminance Light Pen. Maybe go in with the 10th colour on the bottom row. 50% size, 40% strength. And then I'm going to use this now to just add some points. We've got a really kind of glimmering little points of light that really just shimmer. Bring in some points, maybe extend that line across a little bit. I want it to really be quite dramatic on that water surface. Bring in some points. Some dashes across. It's quite strong, the luminance pen, so you just need to be careful with it to a point. Really bringing this light down. Maybe go to the adjustments, the Gaussian blur, and just blur it in slightly, softens it in, maybe about 4%, and that helps. Create a new layer, change the blend mode to add once more, still going in with the light pen within luminance, maybe the 10th colour on the bottom row, bringing it further down, a few points rather than dashes. We'll put it at 40% strength, 50% size. Bring some of this further towards us, even at the bottom of the frame here. A few of these glimmering points. Extend them back a little bit so it just connects it up. Again to the airbrushing soft brush, again with the 9th colour, 4% size, maybe quite low, 10%, and then we can just bind it together a little bit, create a bit of a glow. That'll sort of bond it all together in a way that works. Perhaps I'll also try the 8th colour, still with a soft brush, 3% size, maybe a bit higher, about 30% strength. We can have some of these nice sort of blue colours coming in as well. Mixing down here. Maybe put it up in size, 5% size. Can merge a little bit. I'm going to go to the 2nd colour on the bottom row, 2% size, 30% strength. Just going to bring some of that green down here a little bit. Same at this side, just a little bit more. I'm going to go back to layer 12. I'm going to go in with the smudge, put it to airbrushing soft brush, 10% size, 50% strength. I just want to soften in these edges. That black is a little bit distracting. Let's just soften some of that in. I think that works a little bit better. Now we've got a little bit of a step here that was intended to be like a waterfall. So I'm going to go back up to layer 14, back in with the luminance light pen and the 10th colour, 30% size, 40% strength. And I'm just going to run along this edge as well. Press more in the centre. Less at the edges. I'm also going to switch to this colour, which is the 6th colour on the middle row. Have a slightly lighter tone coming in at the edges. What we're going to do is we're going to bring down with this just gently the sense that there's water coming down from that waterfall. Push it in opposite directions at either side. It's not really a waterfall, it's just a little step where the water is coming down from. Just hint at it. And at the top it's just going to catch the light a little bit more so you can break up that top edge. Quite a subtle effect really. Quite easy to do. And then along that top edge, just run a bit of an uneven surface along that top. Just as the water's pouring over. And then maybe we could even extend that into the water here a little bit. Maybe turn it down from 40 to 25 so it's not too impactful. Extend some of that across. Bring some of these streaks in across the whole area. Just subtly adding to the mixture of textures. Create one more layer, change the blend mode to add once more. Soft brush, where are we? Airbrushing soft brush, go in with the 9th colour. Put it pretty big, 20% size, low at maybe 5% opacity. Bring in some glow just through the center here. And then I'm going to turn it down 3%, keep it the 5%. In fact, I'm going to change to the 10th colour. It's a bit cooler, just to cut through from there to there. Hold it, try and get in some of these angles. Start subtly. Once you feel like you've got a bit more confident, you can go over some of them. More freehand. That can work quite nicely. Go over them quite a lot, if you feel it's appropriate. And then maybe some up here, just cutting through. Ramp them up as necessary. Something like this. Okay, I'm going to leave this tutorial here at this point. Hope you've enjoyed following along. Don't forget to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and maybe give me a suggestion of other things you'd like to see me do. Thanks for watching. See you soon.